Chapter 2. Willie Davis, my uncle. New Balance marshmallows, Rocky Balboa, raw eggs. The Kiwanis Sunrisers pancake breakfast and 2-mile run. 110%. The birth of a runner. Willie Davis carried at least 180 pounds of lean muscle on his 5'7" frame. His dark skin was the color of coffee, no milk or cream, and I would have bet my $10 a week allowance that Willie had once been a big-time college running back or a quick-as-lightning point guard. I never would have pegged him for a runner. Not a distance runner, at least. That was because black people, as far as I could tell, just didn't do certain things. They didn't swim, and they didn't smoke anything but menthol cigarettes. They did not farm, drive foreign cars, play hockey, bowl, live in my neighborhood, or run over a quarter of a mile at a time. Well, Willie did the last of these, often and well. Actually, I later learned he was a farmer too. The local studs always gathered at the starting line of the weekend 5Ks and 10Ks. I can see them now in their short side-split shorts and silky singlets, 7 or 8 of them standing in the cool morning air, shaking their arms gently, doing strides and high knees incessantly, out and back, out and back. As the time of the gun ticked down to 5 or 6 minutes, one of the studs would inevitably mention Willie, who was always prominent in his absence at the starting line. I always lurked up near the start, in spite of my uncle's protest that I'd get run over, hoping to stand for just a moment next to the eventual winner. "Guess Willie's not going to win this one today," someone would say, or "Looks like Willie's giving someone else a chance." Then they'd all laugh nervously. But then, as if on cue and at the last possible moment, Willie's beat-up green and white Ford pickup would roll in, and Willie would get out, dash to the race director's table to pick up his number and some safety pins, and hurry back just in time for the gun. He must have stretched, somehow, in the driver's seat of his truck, as he never strained one of his very prominent and hyper-striated muscles. He almost never lost a race. That's why I still believe there must have been something wrong with Willie on that day. Maybe he'd been in his barn late with a calf that was laid out, or maybe he had a little brown bottle cold from sitting around the kitchen with his buddies the night before, drinking beer. In any case, I refuse to believe that I, as a 12-year-old, would have been able to take Willie down at the height of his abilities. I must say, though, even before my surprise victory, I believed running was in my blood. It hadn't yet been proved, but my uncle claimed he saw in me something of himself when I was a little kid, 5 or 6, tirelessly charging up and down the soccer pitch, swarming the ball with all the other kids. This made me proud and hopeful, as my uncle had been top 10 in the state in cross-country 3 of his 4 years of high school. He had gone on and run at Indiana State on a scholarship, briefly, before he gave it up for cigarettes, motorcycles, and jazz. I didn't know about those other things at age 12, but I was hopeful about running. As a boy, I often obsessed over my uncle's trophies. When my twin brother and I spent the night at my grandmother's house, we slept in Grandma's dusty guest room, my uncle's room as a boy. A special job I'd given myself was caretaker of those forgotten trophies. I kept them properly lined up on their bookshelf. I dusted them and dreamed they were mine. Mostly they were small golden statues of runners in mid-stride, faceless and with perfect form. I sometimes lined them up and raced them against each other. My uncle was my first role model. I wanted to be just like him, but it wasn't until I got a pair of real running shoes that the dream started to feel like it could be real. I got them on my 12th birthday. They were a pair of gray and maroon New Balance Marshmallows, about as good as you could get back then. It was the first real step, symbolic as it was, towards thinking of myself as a runner. The second step was using them, and I used them every morning before daylight if I could manage it. The movie Rocky was important to me when I was 12. Even though Rocky Balboa was a boxer, everyone's favorite scene in the movie was when he was running. It's become a cliche now. Rocky rises in the early morning darkness. He sleepily dons his gray sweatsuit and black knit cap. He cracks a few eggs, swallows them raw, and then, Starting slowly, dodging the pre-dawn delivery men and smoking trash cans in the crowded alleyways, barely shuffling, he makes his way through the dark, grimy streets of Philadelphia. The music begins. Bum, 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 bum. Rocky punches the air. He's alive now. He's going to fly now. He keeps running, and the music picks up. The sun rises, spilling daylight through the streets. Rocky keeps running. Then the music grows larger somehow, and before you know it, Rocky is sprinting. He is flying. And nobody's going to stop this guy, no matter how unknown, no matter how poor, dumb, and hopeless he might be. And then he's bounding up the famous steps, those famous steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum, where thousands upon thousands, maybe over 1 million people by now, have bounded up in imitation of him. And then he's on top of those steps, raising his gloved hands in victory, forever a symbol of the spirit of a champion. Well, I wasn't immune to this. That song had been going through my head for over 5 years by the time I was 12. I too had the spirit of a champion, and some new running shoes. And my New Balances, mushy as they were way better than Rocky's black high-top Chuck Taylors. Therefore, I too would eat raw eggs. The raw eggs part didn't last long. My mom found me out one morning and had me on salmonella watch for 24 hours, then didn't buy eggs until she thought I'd forgotten about Rocky. But I did keep running, and I never forgot about Rocky. I started out running around the block, marveling at how good my size 5s felt, staring down at them while I ran. Then I ran around the block twice, then 3 times. By the time I lined up against Willie Davis at the Kiwanis Sunrisers pancake breakfast and 2-mile run, I'd probably logged a long run of nearly a half mile. It was a good thing I didn't know how woefully underprepared I was. It was also a good thing I had no idea how to pace myself. I never would have competed with him had I understood how foolish I was when I matched Willie stride for stride, going through the first mile mark at 5 minutes and 10 seconds. Sometimes it's good to be stupid. But when I look back on it, it's not my stupidity that I marvel at. The thing that shocks me when I really and truly think back on that day is the astounding willpower of a prideful 12-year-old. While I've always scoffed at the concept of giving 110% as one of the many goofy platitudes some of the dumber football and basketball coaches spout, I believe somehow I may have actually done it on that day. Defying the laws of mathematics and my own physiology, I may have given more than 100%. One thing I know for sure, I never, ever would put myself through such intense pain now that I'm older and wiser. That 5:10 first mile required of me everything I had and then some. And the thing was, there was a mile still left in the race. But the other thing was, Willie didn't get far enough ahead of me. As I bathed myself in lactic acid, nearly fainting every step of the way for the last 1,000 meters of the race, Willie maddeningly kept the same lead of 10 to 15 feet that he'd surged for around a corner just beyond the mile mark. I suppose, savvy racer that he was, he had hoped to break my spirit. He would have with one more good push. He had to have known how close to the edge I was, as I was huffing and snorting like Rocky after his first round with Clubber Lang in Rocky III. But he couldn't quite get me. And when we turned the last corner for home, everything changed because I saw, through my bleary vision, my uncle standing on the side of the road. The surprise in my uncle's face. I might as well have been the Italian stallion himself. And then after the reality set in that the scrawny little scrapper in second place was actually me, his nephew, came the joy and the hope. "Go!" he yelled. Then he started to run alongside me, shouting at me, his arm windmilling as he ran, yelling, "Go! Go! Go! Kick!" For just one moment, one magical, hallucinatory second, I could have sworn that it was not Willie Davis 10 feet in front of me, but Apollo Creed himself. I kicked, and unlike Rocky, I won. I ran a 10:19. My second mile had been even faster than the first. My first negative split effort. It was a day of firsts. In the finish chute, Willie Davis put his arm around me. It was the first time I'd ever touched a black man. He put his arm around me and rubbed my head, and in my hazy joy I had been brave enough to put my arm around him in return. His eyes rolled back in his head from lack of oxygen. I only saw the whites of his eyes and was afraid he might pass out in my arms. Then he regained his focus and smiled at me. "You, my man," he said, "are a runner." As we walked through the chute together, I felt the pleasure of shared effort, which is the pleasure of the runner at the end of a race as he leans on his fellow runners and becomes almost one with them in the delirium of his exhaustion. I felt the pleasure of respect, which was what Willie had given me and what I had given him since first seeing him at those road races years before. And I felt the overwhelming pleasure, the abject relief of knowing I was good at something. At least on that day, my sense of myself was as solid as the road we'd run on.